It's the conversations we have with one another that make us better people.
Exactly.
That make us all human.
Tune into A Cleaner Future with Pollution Evolution.
We are your hosts,
Faith Harrison
and Kimberly Salceda Nupane, with our field technician, Chris Valdivia, who is currently working towards an environmental science degree.
Hi.
You can find us every Saturday at 4 p.m. on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And also follow our Instagram at Pollution Evolution Podcast. Welcome to our second episode. We were originally going to talk about the drinking water contaminant chromium hexavalent, but given all the changes that have taken place in our country in the last week, we felt that it was right to discuss it at a later time and to focus on the environmental executive orders that are affecting the citizens of the United States. We know that executive orders can be hard to understand, so we hope that this week we can discuss current environmental concerns in the United States while we transition to a new presidency, so that way our viewers understand exactly how the environment is going to be affected by these changes.
So before we get started, Chris, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Chris, and I am currently an environmental science major, working towards getting my bachelor's in environmental science. I'm pretty excited to be here, ready to talk about some important topics, and hopefully, shed some light and some little information about what's going on currently.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Firstly, I wanted to ask Chris and Kim, do you guys actually know what executive orders are and how they function?
For our viewers, I'll let you know that I had to ask Faith exactly how do the executive orders work. So that can tell you exactly how much I know about them, which is why we wanted to cover this today. So Chris, what about you?
I kind of have like a general idea about them because we've kind of seen so many of them kind of affect our lives, especially as young adults.
Mm-hmm.
So especially kind of starting with Trump in his first presidency and then Biden in his presidency, and then now my understanding is kind of like president's power to dictate law without going through the three branches of government.
Yeah, that's pretty it. Like, for our viewers, a more formal definition is literally just a federal directive that the president has the authority to pass that helps run the federal government. And typically, that's something that can be readily undone. Usually, they're undone by new presidents that come into office within the first few weeks. We typically see this with all transitions of power. Like, this isn't unique. Like, what Trump is doing isn't fully unique to him. It's something typically seen and done. I just think that the level at which he's doing it is what makes it so unprecedented.
Yeah, I think it was about 75 that he had signed within his first day. And so today we wanted to talk about specifically the environmental related ones. There are quite a few that are going to be affecting our environment, and we're honestly concerned. So we wanted to get the word out, and hopefully you can get the word out as well and share that information with people. So do we want to go ahead and dive right in?
Yeah, I think we can dive right in.
Absolutely.
So our very first topic that we're going to cover today is Trump withdrawing the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. And this action will make the U.S. one of 4 nations in the entire world, and that includes Iran, Syria, and Yemen, that are not a part of this historic climate deal. And if you're not familiar with the Paris Climate Agreement, it was an agreement signed between essentially all of the countries in the world to help reduce overall warming. And although it's not directly enforceable, a lot of countries took the pledge to do better for their citizens in the future, and they set climate targets, some for 2030, some for later on, and they're hoping to make changes to their economy and energy infrastructures to achieve those. And so leaving it is very devastating because very literally it's almost like taking back the oath that we made with the rest of the nations around the world to do better. And we're essentially just telling them that those words and those promises meant nothing, and we're not actually dedicated to having a long-lasting future for us.
And whenever Faith mentioned it wasn't necessarily enforceable, greenhouse gases are the ones that they were focusing on for the Paris Agreement. And greenhouse gases in the United States are presently unregulated. They were unregulated even before Trump took power. So that shows that we had taken this pledge to actually like help out our climate, our earth, and we weren't doing anything to enforce it to make sure that we were helping our earth. And I think that's what's pushed us past our 1.5 degrees Celsius tipping point.
And target.
Chris, what do you have
Yeah,
any thoughts?
it's also very devastating to me to see that because I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys as well. We're all pretty passionate about the environment and protecting the only home that we have, and to have a country who is kind of like we're seen as kind of leaders throughout the world. I mean, in a way that we are a power in the world, you know, and we should be leading by example. And we're, as y'all have said, that we're kind of like one of the leaders of carbon emissions. You know, I mean, we're not the top, but we're pretty near. We do produce crude oil at a faster rate than ever before. I think we're the number one. We're not the number one exported because we like to hoard it, but we do produce gallons and gallons of crude oil.
Yeah.
And that's what we do here is process the crude oil, because that's what we do have here is crude oil factories. We export the other oil that we find from shale rock that we have been recently doing through new technology and stuff like that. But it's very sad to see that because we have also devastated our own ecosystems in our own, land.
For viewers that don't know, me, Chris, and Kim are all from Texas, and like we're one. We sit on massive deposits of oil, natural gas, and other various non-renewable resources, and it's a part of our life. Like we are directly impacted by these decisions, and it's not one thing to just post on social media like, oh, fossil fuels are bad and these decisions are killing our planet. It's our life, it's the lives of our family, our friends, and even people that we don't really fuck with, like
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I feel like it puts us in a weird position because knowing where we come from, people rely on those kinds of jobs to, live, and there's no really other alternative to it. And now that we're not even going to be funding to find those alternatives is kind of insane.
Yeah, and that brings us back to like talking about the executive orders that he's done. One of the other ones that he's done, he declared an energy emergency, and this was aimed at increasing the production of fossil fuels like oil and gas while disregarding clean air and water as.
Words.
Clean energy and efficiency standards that reduce emissions and save money.
Yeah, and it's always about money, isn't it? Like Chris was saying, and with these executive orders, they frame them as providing jobs to Americans and doing all of these things to help better our economy. But ultimately, Biden passed the Inflation Reduction Act, and that was another executive order that Donald Trump repealed. And under that act, in Republican states, 200,000 jobs were created for clean energy. There is massive amounts of growth. We can transition to like a future of electrification that relies on clean energy, and it could create a job pool where currently there isn't one because unfortunately with fossil fuels they are finite. They will run out eventually. Even if it's not in our lifetime, this is not something that humans can rely on long term to continue economic and domestic growth because there's just not going to be enough of it. And I don't think that should be a reason for us to continue using it because the environmental impacts just don't weigh out the economic ones. Like it's not, you can't compare the two.
Absolutely, I agree to that up to 100% because it's like the consequences of the process of doing that is not worth the outcome because there are better ways to do it.
Yeah, and that is also like one of the things that we touch on is health. It's not just the environment that's being affected by this. If there's no clean air, there's no clean water, that's you as a person breathing and drinking and being exposed to those things on a daily basis. And all three of us have been exposed on a daily basis for at least 17 years of our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And most of them are cancer causing, and we have no idea now at the age of like 25 or 26 if we're going to have cancer when we hit 30 or 40 because of what we were exposed to. And it's like literally living with a ticking time bomb in your body and knowing that it was for profit, our lives and the safety of our towns were worth somehow more, and you could put a value on a human life.
Yeah.
Even though we have been exposed to like direct air and water pollution, and or pretty much most of America has, we also get polluted through our food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all guys heard about red dye number 3 getting banned in the U.S. I
Mhm.
think like a week or two ago.
Yeah.
It's been linked to cancer for decades,
Yeah.
and they're only now banning it. But they don't even touch red dye number 40, which is worse. So we're feeding our kids all these dyes and artificial preservatives and stuff like that. And there have been studies linked to emotional problems and ADHD and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
we're kind of like fighting on all fronts at this point.
Yeah, it's almost like in every aspect of our life, pollution has touched on at this point. And I think it's worse knowing that a lot of the people that are doing the polluting have known for years about the effects. Like, I'm not sure if you guys know, but in the early 20th century, it was known that carbon dioxide and like methane specifically cause global climate change. And
Yes.
these were major companies that had these studies conducted, and they just hushed it under. And then for years, they played dumb. And then now that the public knows, nobody's really holding them accountable for it. They're still
Yeah, absolutely.
profiting.
And it's like, I don't know, it's not common knowledge this, but I know you guys know this, but there's microplastics in the water cycle. And the reason that they have come to this conclusion is they were doing a study and could not find a control for the study because every sample they took was contaminated with microplastics.
Yeah.
That's insane. You'll have to send us that link so we can put it up with the podcast.
Yeah, and they've even found microplastics in the deepest place on Earth. We essentially made this podcast because of the sheer amount of pollution we've been exposed to. Our bodies are eventually going to have to evolve for the amount of environmental stress they've been subjected to. And
But it's just like you saying that because DNA records things,
mm-hmm.
like trauma.
Well, before we get too far into this episode, I want to mention, we are also making this because we want everybody to know that there is hope. Just because these things are happening and it's happening at an extremely accelerated rate does not mean that we as people cannot come together and do something about it. Because if you saw, this one is not related to the environment, but the birthright citizenship as executive order has actually been halted because there are so many states that fought against it. And that's one of the biggest things, is making sure that we fight against the things that are unjust and not fair for our people and for our communities.
Exactly. And that brings me to the third executive order. This one covers Trump wanting to halt offshore wind farming and bring back offshore drilling. And a lot of those areas that this drilling would be happening in are already protected off of the coast, and they have sensitive ecosystems and lives that live there. And so when Kimberly talks about hope and remembering each other in our community, we also can't forget about our friends in the sea and that live in the trees and all of our community members, not just humans. Mm-hmm. Like, all of us live on this earth, it's all of our home. I always think about when astronauts go to space and look down and realize that like we're just like a big marble in the sky, and that we're all just like one entity essentially. And then they're like, why the heck have we ever divided ourselves like that? Because in space there's no borders. Mm-hmm. There's no anything. It's just our land and our oceans. And I think that if you can like zoom out and shift your perspective, it'll make it a lot easier to understand and see fighting pollution and fighting for what's right isn't only just for like justice or like politics. It's literally to save the very order of our humanity and our planet. Like, it
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
I've seen this a lot on social media and stuff like that, no human being is illegal, especially on stolen land. I feel like we all have a right to be here no matter where you're, like what country we're at, because at the end of the day, those lines are not there in real life. Humans drew those lines, but in reality, we're all the same. There's no borders. There's no, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's why climate issues are so important, because it's not like it's our home, like both of you said, like it's we all live here. And it brings me to the next topic, which is Trump is also trying to freeze climate funding. So the Inflation Reduction Act has created more than 400,000 new clean energy jobs and spurred over $422 billion in investments across the country, including more than 200,000 new jobs and $200 billion in Republican-held districts alone.
It literally jump started the economy after COVID. I don't think that we can understate how much the IRA actually pushed forward America as like one of the forefronts of green energy, because there's a lot of giants emerging from like emerging economies and whatnot, like BRICS. But I think that the IRA really put America at the forefront and showed that we are beginning to take climate issues seriously. And it showed the world that although we have caused a lot of this pollution, that we are taking necessary steps to fix it and to incentivize clean energy and incentivize people to use solar and to use better options for the environment. And now that it's been repealed, it's just devastating, especially because of the economic boom it actually brought, and coupled with the environmental issues. Because I mean, we're all struggling with money right now. 400,000 jobs is amazing. Mm-hmm. People need to eat. People need a house.
Yeah, and, like, regardless of who you are. Those are basic necessities.
I feel like nowadays people are kind of becoming more aware of the climate issues because it's actually starting to affect them. For example, like this last summer or last fall, we had historic 2 Category 5 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. And the reason that those occurred was because sea temperature was so high, unnaturally high, and it fueled those hurricanes. And we saw the mass destruction. We're seeing fires in LA. There's actually, what was it called? The Pasadena fire?
Yes.
There's actually another fire currently, I think it's called the Hughes fire, that started up in Los Angeles. We're having water disparities, and water is more precious now probably than ever before because I feel like we're continuously using it in the wrong ways. We're kind of wasting it, and once we pollute our water and we can't filter it out due to PFAS, which are forever chemicals that cannot be broken down, then we don't got no water. Yeah. Our water is limited, and that's what people are not. I feel like they don't understand that yet either because they don't feel the effects of that.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you say that, Chris, because in the Panhandle, one of the largest aquifers in the U.S. is called the Ogallala Aquifer, and it sits on multiple states. It is being rapidly depleted due to one, drought, two, farming practices, and three, mismanagement and poor planning. Because our farmers are our backbones, we need them to feed us, and I'm not going to shame them for irrigating because without them we would starve. But the issue is the mismanagement and the worsening droughts because of climate change. But they consider that water fossil water. In there, it's considered a non-renewable resource. We've considered water and air renewable resources, but because of human activity, we've literally pushed something that we're supposed to have infinite amounts of to the brink.
Absolutely, and now that you talk about the aquifer, where we're located here in the Panhandle, we are actually on the lower end of it. The deeper end, where it's actually filling up more than they're taking, is up in Nebraska. Here, this is where it trickles down to, and it takes not in our lifetime to reach here. You know, it takes several hundreds of years to get down here. And our farming, what do we farm around here is corn, and corn takes a lot of water to grow. A lot of water. And we also have cattle that takes a lot of water as well. So I feel like it's kind of the mismanagement, but it's also like not the farmer's fault because we need our farmers.
The industrial use.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
We should clarify.
Yeah, we're not shaming farmers. We love farmers.
No, we love our farmers. No, absolutely not. They get the raw end of the deal because at the end of the day, they have to buy seeds every year because the seed companies have a monopoly over them because they own they own the intellectual information of the genetic code of those plants, so they get the bad end of the deal most of the time. So.
Yeah, and then they're shamed when anything goes wrong with the food supply without looking at the puppeteer behind all of this. Because there's
Hmm.
no way that our food industry should be a monopoly, but it is. I mean, all of our food we pretty much eat is owned by like 5 to 7 companies, and then they have a bunch of offshoots. And the issues that Chris is discussing directly affects that because if you only have a very few people distributing these items, what are farmers to do? What choice do they have?
Absolutely. No citizen wants to do that kind of job.
Mm-mm.
So I guess that brings us to our fifth point, which is Trump has got rid of Biden's 30 by 30 commitment. And for those of you who don't know, the commitment is to protect 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. This commitment is to protect our natural resources and not even just our resources, but like our lands, like national parks, the people, like you guys realize that Yellowstone National Park is going to be affected by pollution. It already is affected by pollution. That like all of these places that we go to, like Arches National Park, like Zion, like the
Glacier National
yeah,
Park.
any of them, they all have pollution.
And PFAS specifically in the water. Because PFAS is everywhere. A study came out. I don't remember the year, but we will link it below with all of our sources. But PFAS is found in every single water source, even in the most remote areas. These are forever chemicals that are causing cancer, disrupting your endocrine system, and literally affecting the way that an entire system of your body is functioning. And as we know, like every part of our body needs to function in tandem for us to be healthy. And it's just, it goes so much deeper. And like we keep bringing up all these connections because we're really trying to emphasize the point that it's not just like a one ticket issue. Our health is affected by our environment, and our environment affects our health.
And our environment is
Yeah.
affected by the pollution that is caused by these industries. Like typically, like it's not going to be a diesel truck or train sitting around for a long time that's going to cause the massive amounts of CO2 that we're seeing. In in Borger alone, I think there was 2 million tons of CO2. That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm really frustrated. I'm honestly just upset today. I'm upset for our planet. I'm upset for the people. And I just genuinely am imploring everyone that's listening to really, really, really emphasize kindness and love and understanding during this time because genuinely there's so much programming and hatred, and there's so much like so many things happening right now and so many events and losses happening that more than ever we have to remember that we have to get through this together.
Our biggest asset is our community.
Because at the end of the day, yeah, these CEOs might be in charge, but it's the people that make the world go round. It's the people that, do the deliveries, and it's the people that ship products across seas and this and that. It's us, people like us, who really make it work, and they just kind of sit at the top.
Exactly.
So
Honestly, the people, the working class, like all of us, we are the majority and we're suffering for the rule of few. And I just don't believe that we need to give in to what they're telling us, and we need to remember our power and who we are as a collective.
Yeah, the biggest thing is not giving up. Like we cannot. I know that it is so hard right now to not give up, to not look at the headlines and not look at the stories and see everything. Our world is on fire. The news stories are horrid, and like it's hard to keep your composure during those times. But we want everybody to know, like, we are here. That's why we're making this podcast. That's why we wanted to talk to Chris, is to show, like, it's the conversations we have with one another that make us better people.
Exactly.
That make us all human.
Yeah.
Honestly, this time, this is the first time that I'm actually fearful. Like, I know a little selfish, but fearful of myself, because I was kind of like scared of my citizenship status, Like I've never in my 25 years of living here have ever worried about that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if it was like that scary for me, I can imagine how scary it is to those people who are undocumented, you know, who are kind of stuck here.
That's something that, while it's not environmental related, I do want us to touch on. It's very important right now for us to remember, if ICE comes to your town, you are not required to tell them anything. You are not required to tell them where your neighbor is, or if you know anything about them, or what the name is, or anything. Look out for one another, please, you guys. Like, this is our plea, honestly, is like, we need everybody to look out for one another, because these times are getting really hard.
Yeah, and World War II and the events that led up to it are echoing in our country now. So now is the time to reject that and say, no, I'm actually going to love my neighbor, and I'm actually going to stand up against a system that is telling me that they're the problem while they literally run me dry and bleed me for billions of dollars. And so I just hope that you'll take our words and truly heed them, because now is not the time to lead with hatred or misunderstanding. We need to level with each other and like realize that we're all human. This is all our planet. And honestly, if it's not good, you got to keep going until it gets better, and we can't stop until things are better.
Yeah.
Period.
So that has been Pollution and Solution.
Thank you for joining us, Chris, while we had our discussion / ramblings and rants.
Of course. I loved it here. I thank you guys for welcoming me and giving me the opportunity to be on here.
Join us next week where we post about
hexavalent chromium. Have a great rest of your day.
Named Chris Valdivia, who is currently working towards an environmental science degree.
And he's our field technician.
And he is our field tech. Oh, God. Okay, so I gotta redo that.